All right, we're going to get started. Good afternoon. My name is Ed Martin. I'm the Vice President of Hartsdale Pet Cemetery, and we want to welcome you to our 20th annual War Dog Memorial Celebration. For those who have been complaining about the cold and rainy spring we've been having, this day is for you. We're going to start the program with an invocation by Delroy Russell, who's the liturgical assistant to Mother Joanne Campo at St. Andrew's Church next door. Many of you probably remember, if you've been coming to our events, you remember Joanne. She wanted to be here today, but she's at home recovering from a minor surgical procedure, nothing too serious. So she's unable to attend, but we are grateful that Delroy graciously offered his services in her absence. So with no further ado, I'll have Delroy come up and do the invocation now. For those who are able, could you please stand? Let us pray. God and Father of us all, we entrust all who are dear to us to your never-failing care and love for this life and the life to come, knowing that you are doing for them better things than we can desire or pray for. We remember those, especially today, our silent heroes, who have given our military, our police, and all those in need of their service, their friendship, their love, their lives, and their loyalty. They are heroes who willingly followed commands and who put themselves in danger's way. So we remember today all our silent canine heroes, and we ask your blessings on all dogs who give their devotion and service, and who are willing to serve us, protect us, and love us. We give our thanks and ask your blessings on all who give of themselves to make this place true memorial to our silent heroes. We gather in prayer, remembering all the brave silent heroes who we'll never forget for their honor, their bravery, their love, and their sacrifices. Amen. Thank you, Delroy. By the way, it's a hot day today. We have cold water over here, so if at any point in time you get thirsty, need water, just feel free to get up and grab it. The War Dog Memorial Celebration is a highly anticipated event every year. This year we have an extra special program for you. In fact, I'll go on record and say that today's War Dog celebration just might be our most poignant ever. I have no doubt that the two speakers you will be hearing from today will certainly touch your hearts. One is Marine Corps combat veteran Matthew Plumeri and his canine partner Gulliver, an 11-year-old Gisela. Actually, he's 12, right? He's 12. He's going to be 12, right? Gulliver is a military working dog who was at Matthew's side during their deployment in the most dangerous areas in Afghanistan. Matthew will discuss Gulliver's role and how they were reunited once their tour of duty ended. Our other special guest is Nancy Cesari. Nancy is here today to tell us about her latest full-length documentary titled Canine Soldiers, The Militarization of Love. I have seen the film, it's outstanding, and I urge all of you to watch it. The documentary is currently airing on PBS television right now, so for those with cable, you can set your DVR and just search under the title Canine Soldiers, and you'll find it, and you can record it and watch it at your leisure. Nancy, in one sense, is telling the story about Matthew and his dog Gulliver, although they were not part of the movie. The movie Canine Soldiers explores the intimate bond between military working dogs, MWDs for short, and their handlers. These are combat soldiers, like Matthew, who make life and death decisions based on the instincts of the dogs who lead their patrols. Like you, I can't wait to hear Matthew's and Nancy's comments, thoughts, and words. Today, June 11th, 2017, is in many respects quite a historic day. It was 100 years ago that President Woodrow Wilson on April 2nd, 1917, appeared before Congress and called for a declaration of war against Germany. 4 days later, his request was granted. 2 weeks from today, it will be exactly 100 years ago when the first 14,000 U.S. infantry troops landed in France to begin training for battle. Soon, dogs will be serving in battle alongside our American soldiers. So today, we again pay tribute to the thousands of American canines who have served in war-torn places, from the foxholes of Bastogne, to the jungles of Vietnam, to the rubble of 9/11, and to the cities in Afghanistan. Behind you, up on the hill, sits our famous War Dog Memorial that was built with donations from dog lovers for man's most faithful friend. Some of those words are chiseled in large letters on the 10-ton granite base. Dedicated in 1923, the memorial was originally built to honor the dogs of World War I. At the time, nobody foresaw that there would be another war. It wasn't until World War II that dogs were mustered en masse into service. The U.S. government called for 300,000 canine volunteers, and that's 4 times the number of men Abraham Lincoln asked for the start of the Civil War. So today we pay tribute not only to the thousands of American canines who have served in battle-scarred places, but also to all pets that have served humanity, including seeing eye dogs, therapy dogs, and police and fire dogs. So welcome to our celebration. Before we hear from our guest speakers, I'm going to cancel that. Benjamin Pomerantz was supposed to be here today with us. He was unable to due to a death in his family. So I'm going to introduce to you the first speaker then today. Our first speaker is going to be Marine Corps combat veteran Matthew Plumeri and his canine partner Gulliver. Matthew will share his special bond, war experiences, and post-war experiences with Gulliver. Matthew's a Veterans Affairs advocate. He will also talk about his role as a Veterans Benefit Advisor at the U.S. Military Academy and at Montrose Veterans Hospital. Matthew, come on up.
Just want to say thank you for inviting me and Gulliver to spend this day with you guys here today. This definitely touches near and dear to my heart for obvious reasons. Just a little bit about me. I went into the Marine Corps in June of 2009, and after I graduated from military police school, I got selected to go to Lackland Air Force Base to attend basic military working dog handlers course. It was at that point that I met several other Marines who were also in school at that time, who were there for a more advanced school, a specialized school called Specialized Search Dog School, which is what Gulliver is. So after I found out about it and what it was, I really wanted to see if I'd be able to make it and go for it, so I did. And what's unique about a specialized search dog compared to a regular military working dog is they have a little bit more capabilities. For example, basic military working dogs, or PEDs, which stands for Patrol Explosive Detector Dog, primarily work off of a 6-foot leash or off of possibly a 20-foot long lead when they're detecting explosives. So as you can imagine, that's if the dog did indicate on explosives, that's not really a safe distance to be finding explosives. So what's unique about specialized search dogs, they were created to kind of combat that aspect of the job, so to speak. So what they can do, they wear a harness just like this, and on each side there's 2 pouches. So on one pouch you put a rock or a counterweight, something like that, and on the other side you put a walkie-talkie, and it's on a high enough volume so that the dog can hear it. And the handler wears a headset in his ear with a microphone, and the dog is able to work off leash without the restriction of the lead. So they can be slightly more independent if they catch the scent of an explosive odor. And the thing that really sets them apart is they learn directional commands. So they can be told forward, left, right. You can tell them to down so that the rest of the foot patrol can advance up to catch up to where you and the dog are at. And some of them can work up to 300 to 400 meters away from the dog and the handler and the rest of the patrol. I'm sorry, thank you. So as you can imagine, 3 to 4 football fields is definitely a lot better than 6 to 20 feet. So that's what makes a specialized search dog very unique. So when I graduated from Specialized Search Dog School in 2011, I found out that I was going to Camp Pendleton in San Diego, California, which is where I met Gulliver. We spent about 2 years training together, learning each other. He was in a reserve status when we met, which means he wasn't primarily being worked by a handler before I got there. He was a secondary status, so he was basically being taken care of but not really trained. So I got him, and he was a little rusty, so it took a while to get him back to where he would need to be so that we could compete against our peers to be selected to deploy to Afghanistan. Which we ultimately went to in June of 2013. We spent 7 months there, and we worked with various units while we were there from various countries even. I worked a lot with the British Royal Air Force. I worked with the Republic of Georgia, and I also worked with 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines Fox Company, which I spent more than half of my deployment with. And I worked with Special Operations Task Force 7, which is the equivalent in Denmark to our Green Berets, which was a very good time. That was probably the favorite part of my deployment. During our time in Afghanistan, we led over 500 combat patrol hours. So he's laying down, he's tired, being lazy, which he's earned it.
Right.
And during that time, I'm proud to say, we walked point on every single foot patrol that we were ever on. No matter if it was a Tier 1 IED area, which meant there was a very high likelihood that somebody was going to be harmed because of explosives, or if there was incoming small arms or machine gun fire, it didn't matter. We were up front. Even when the interpreter would tell me that he could hear on his radio, which is the same radio that the Taliban used, that they were saying there's the bounty on the dog handler, which isn't the most comforting thing to hear when you're outside of the wire. But during our time in those 500 hours we were outside of the wire, nobody that ever walked behind us was injured because of improvised explosive devices or anything for that matter. So I definitely credit that 100% to Gulliver, and couldn't thank him enough for getting me and all my friends home in one piece, so to speak. When we returned home, I began talking to my command about the possibilities of adopting him. At this point, he had just turned 9 years old, and our deployment really took its toll on him. It wasn't exactly a modest time. We were definitely in combat every day, pretty much engaged with the enemy. And as much as, I tried to, as the handler, not let that run down the leash to the dog, the stress and the anxiety, you kind of can't really help it. It just happens. And that does affect them. So towards the end, he really wouldn't want to go on helicopters anymore because he knew that, he probably wasn't going to have the best time. It was going to be high stress. It was going to be kinetic. Explosions bothered him as well as small arms fire. I had a hard time shooting my weapon while he was next to me, but he was pretty good about it. Usually he was off leash, and I would recall him, and we would get to cover, and I could engage, and sometimes he would look me in the face and kind of, help to calm the situation down. But going off a tangent, I'm sorry, but all of that to me indicated that he needed to retire. I felt like he had put in his time and he should be able to leave just like I was able to. So this was January of 2014, and my contract was going to be up in May of 2014. So I was kind of on the clock, so to speak, to figure out how I was going to pull this off. And get my command to approve it so that he would be retired. Ultimately, I lost that battle, and I had to go back home here to New York alone, which I always say that the Marine Corps, you know, I don't think there's anything in this world that I wouldn't be able to do now because of the Marine Corps and my time there and the friendships that I made and the experiences that I had. But that was the one thing that I had no training for, and I didn't think I was going to be able to do. So my family, my sister over there, they were very supportive when I got back home, and I went back to school. So in the fall of 2014, I attended Marist College across the river in Poughkeepsie. I reached out to the Veterans Club at Marist and told them about my story, and that my kennel master had recently contacted me and said, you know, it's coming. Just give it a couple of months. You know, you're going to be able to come get him. So upon reaching out and giving them this information, they suggested that perhaps we start a GoFundMe campaign so that I would be able to go back out to California and get Gulliver. A lot of times what the military does when a previous handler adopts their military working dog, they put them in a kennel crate they put them in a kennel crate in the belly of a plane and fly them to wherever that handler is located. For me, that I never saw that as an option. Even if I was going to sell everything I had and figure out a way, I was going to fly out to California and get 2 tickets for the ride back so that he could go with me. So ultimately, President Murray at the time at Marist College found out about our story, and he got me an interview with the Marist magazine, their newspaper, and also with Time Warner Cable, who came and did a video interview, which was in the fall of 2014. And ultimately, because of President Murray and Marist College, I hit my initial goal of $3,000 to go out to California and pay for most of my expenses. However, President Murray told me during a meeting that he wanted me to raise the cap, because he said he was getting calls from alumni who were interested in donating, even though it had already reached its cap, maybe use the funds for veterinary care or food, whatever it might be. So I did that, and in less than a month, the campaign brought in about $10,000. Couldn't be more thankful to everybody who helped make that happen, and those extra funds that weren't spent in California are now used to combat his osteoarthritis that he has in his back legs with medication and lots and lots of treats and toys. After that campaign finished, my kennel master contacted me in December of 2014, right around Christmas, and I, in about 4 days' notice, purchased plane tickets, rented a hotel, or got a hotel, rented a car, and I went out there, spent a few days in California, saw some of my old friends who were still there. They helped me make sort of a reunion video, if you will, that's on YouTube. If you go on YouTube, you could watch it. I think it'd be worth 4 minutes of your time. It would be SSD Gulliver retires to New York, and it'll come up. So we came back to New York ultimately in January of 2015, and since then, Gulliver's doing much better actually with his arthritis. My vet helped me get him on some very good medication. My girlfriend Alex and I exercise him a lot, so he's very active, and he's doing extraordinary for a dog of his age, I must say. I also registered him with the service dog registry so that we can also bring him many places that we go, including out to dinner a couple of times. After I graduated from Marist College, I found out about a position with New York State Division of Veterans Affairs as a Veterans Benefits Advisor. And what that entailed is helping advocate and assist for veterans and be their liaison, essentially, with the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs. So what we do is we can file VA disability claims, apply for your post 9/11 GI Bill, VA home loan, property tax exemptions, many things in that nature. I was extremely fortunate, and I was canvassed by the state for that position. I interviewed and I was selected, and I've been with them coming up on a year this August. Gulliver comes to work with me frequently, and many of the veterans that I see, sometimes we have to have difficult conversations about things that they experienced as it relates to disability claims. So it's always good to have a partner like Gulliver in there with you to kind of calm and ease the tension in the room. So he's, I guess, still working, you could say, in that capacity, and I'm blessed to be able to continue to serve the greatest demographic of people, I believe, our country's veterans. So thank you for listening to my story. Thank you. I'll be here after the ceremony concludes as well to answer any questions that anybody has about VA benefits or anything about that nature, or about Gulliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Good job. Good job.
Thank you, Matthew. That was probably one of the most emotional, passionate speeches that I've heard at the War Dog Memorial Ceremony.
Wow.
So thank you, and also on behalf of everybody here, I'm sure I should share sentiments. Thank you for your service. Our other guest is Nancy Shazari, who made a special journey here from her home in Austin, Texas, where she's a professor in the radio and television and film department at the University of Texas, UT, at Austin. Let me tell you a little about Nancy. She is an experienced director, producer, and cinematographer on both broadcast documentaries and award-winning independent films. She brings with her more than 20 years' experience as a director of photography and over 30 documentaries and feature films for ABC, National Geographic, PBS, and England's Channel 4 and the BBC. She has filmed in Europe, the US, Africa, India, Pakistan, Iceland, and Latin America. She was nominated for a 2002 Television Emmy for Outstanding Cinematography on the Human Race. And today, Nancy will tell you about her latest film, Canine Soldiers, The Militarization of Love. The film follows handler Sergeant Marcin Radwin and Sergeant Danielle Jennings and their canine companions from training to deployment to find improvised explosive devices, IEDs, in the harsh landscape of Afghanistan. As I mentioned earlier, I watched the documentary and found it to be extremely powerful. The film opens our hearts to new truths about ourselves, our connection to nature, and ultimately what it means to be human. Nancy will tell us why she made us the film. Please give a warm welcome to Nancy Shazari.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Sergeant Palmieri, for your wonderful speech, and thanks for having me up here. I'm usually behind the camera, so I'm not that comfortable being in front of a big audience like this, so I will read some things that I wrote. and tell you why I made the film and what I learned along the way. And like most of you, I'm sure, I was a pet owner. I have a dog. I've had a dog in our family since I was a child, and a cat. So I've always grown up with animals, but I never really understood the deep connection that we have with canines that goes back thousands of years, until I looked at the relationship of a canine soldier with his handler and discovered a whole lot of things about dogs and humans as well. So I'll read some things. Here's a quote from the Atlantic that says, in 2010, after 4 years of failed attempts and $19 billion spent, the war agency charged with the task of defeating the IED announced that the single greatest force in detecting IEDs was indisputably a dog and its handler. So I began thinking about military war dogs, and at the time I was making a film about military tattoos and a tattoo shop across the street from Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas, and discovering that soldiers created these tattoos before they left, before they deployed, and when they returned, and these pieces of art spoke to a lot of things that really was about their experiences and came from the unconscious. So through art they were able to externalize a lot of their feelings and keep their memory. And at that time I heard about the dog. Someone was talking about how a dog will fetch up to $15,000 as a bounty if killed by the enemy or captured. And I thought, wow, maybe if we open our hearts to dogs who are suffering through the war, perhaps we'll feel more for the humans who we kind of tend to forget about. We see them in airports coming and going, and we don't really understand what it's like to go to war, those of us who haven't deployed. So that was initially the kind of impetus behind it. And I decided then we understand that many factors affect a soldier's choice to enlist, be it family history, the promise of a better life for their families, a chance to see something outside of the town they grew up in, or passionate feelings about protecting their country. But many of the dog handlers I spoke to had lost or seen one of their comrades killed or maimed by an IED, and at that point they had a sort of epiphany and decided to return to the States and train to become dog handlers. Their new mission would be to save lives. By walking out in front of everybody else, making sure it's safe for the soldiers behind them, often holding a weapon in one hand and a leash in the other, they would become the enemy's #1 target because they were able to find the bombs. So here we have Homo sapiens, the smartest species on Earth, being led by a four-legged creature whose all-powerful sense of smell can detect bombs that robots can't find. This fact alone should engender utmost admiration and humility if we acknowledge that non-human animals can be geniuses at using their senses that are hundreds of times more powerful than our own. So we see ourselves as top dog on the planet until you realize the genius that other mammals especially have, and how we've been interconnected. So when I was thinking about the film early on, for some reason this image came up in my mind of Saint Christopher soldier type leading with his dog, leading a troop across a dangerous, like a desert, or Saint Christopher leading his troops across a desert or a river. And why I had the image of Saint Christopher, I have no idea, but reading about Saint Christopher, whoa, I looked into Google and he comes up. Early Christians conceived of Saint Christopher as a man with a man's body and a dog's head. So our very early images of Saint Christopher is dog's head and man's body, which is something I think the Christians borrowed from the Greeks. Hermanibus was a continuation of Anubis, who was the Egyptian jackal dog, human body, black dog's head, beautiful, that you see in the Met or anywhere, leading someone across to the other side, to the afterlife. So in many civilizations, a dog is needed to take you to the afterlife. So I said the ancients understood the symbiotic relationship between human and canines unconsciously, perhaps. Perhaps they depicted our deep connection to canines by a representation of St. Christopher crossing the river, who is half man and half dog. Very much like our military dog teams today, a team is neither man nor dog, but half man and half dog, relying on each other, performing what each can't do alone. Man thinks ahead, animals stay in the moment, and the two together form a third effective entity. That's nothing new because we've shared a history of coevolution with canines, so it's not surprising that this military working dog team can be such an effective unit. Temple Grandin, who you may have heard of, she's an animal biologist, points out that dogs co-evolved along humans as working companions since the beginning of recorded time. They have been leading us forever in the hunt, guarding our flocks, protecting our homes, our children. They gave humans a distinct advantage and helped us evolve from hunter-gatherers to breeders with dogs corralling and protecting sheep and cattle. Grandin likes to go as far as saying Neanderthals died out because they didn't have dogs. So it's no wonder that they've played such a crucial role in our dream life or projections into the afterlife as we stand here today in this beautiful cemetery, whose pet owners over time must have shared similar hopes of being reunited with their beloved pets in an afterlife. Military history of working dogs and handlers in the U.S. military are part of a long continuum, ranging from the Roman Empire to Spanish conquistadors in Mexico, to the U.S. in Vietnam, and today in Afghanistan. Used by nations throughout the ages, from the Egyptians, Greeks, and Persians to the Sarmatians, Alans, and Slavs, dogs have been a feature of war. The Romans trained the Molossian dog specifically for battle, often coating them in protective spiked metal collars in mail armor and arranging them into attack formations. The Norman invaders of Britain used mastiffs in their attempt to conquer the Irish, who in turn used Irish wolfhounds to bring down Norman knights on horseback. In the 1500s, Spanish conquistadors trained armored dogs to kill and disembowel indigenous people when they invaded their lands. In the mid-1800s, the U.S. Army brutally put down the Seminole Indians of Florida using bloodhounds to attack. First World War, dogs were used by international forces to deliver vital messages. About 1 million dogs died in action. In 1941, in Second World War, the Soviet Union used dogs strapped with explosives to destroy invading German tanks. And in the Vietnam War, approximately 5,000 war dogs served, and the canine units are estimated to have saved over 10,000 human lives. It is estimated that about 200 Vietnam War dogs survived the war to be assigned at other U.S. bases outside the U.S. The remaining canines were euthanized or left behind. So we come up to Robbie's Law, and apparently Robbie is buried. Is that correct? He's buried here?
He's not buried here.
He's not buried here, but there's a memorial to him. Memorial, okay. So up to this point, it was legal and common practice to abandon or put down military working dogs at the end of their useful service. Historically viewed as surplus equipment, they weren't seen as having value beyond the military purpose for which they were trained. That mindset has changed dramatically, due in no part to the public's growing awareness of how these animals were treated after years of dutiful service. Mary Thurston, who is the pet cemetery historian here, lives in Austin, was one of the people involved in changing that law, and it is now become called the Robbie Law. It was a military working dog named Robbie, whose own fate changed that of other MDWs to come. Robbie's Law was signed by President Clinton in 2000, November 2000, and it required that all MDWs suitable for adoption be available for placement after their service. Unfortunately, it was too late to save Robbie, whose former handler fought valiantly to adopt him to no avail. Obviously, all along the way, man's goal to produce a war dog that kept one side free from any of the invaders while allowing them to evade others. Military dogs deservedly are celebrated as war heroes, but while national law protects animals from abuse and endangerment as pets, military working dogs often face harsh conditions for a greater good. Some of you might understandably be opposed to co-opting animals in human violence, since the animals have no choice, but they too, like humans, deserve to lead a peaceful life after their service. The moral dilemma of whether you send animals to war is hard to argue when you realize that 2 out of 3 American deaths are caused by IEDs, and that a trained military dog will save around 150 lives over its career. But interestingly enough, to be a successful team, the dog and human must form a rich, loving bond. Without this bond at the head of a unit, the mission may be jeopardized by a dog who is not deeply attached to his or her handler and will not listen to his or her commands. Such a contrast that in the middle of this horrible environment of war, when the unit behind focuses on a kill or be killed mentality to survive, the handler and the dog must keep up a spirit of search and play And in the middle of this inhuman environment, you have this intimate bond, a kind of love affair going on. Thus, one of our experts in the film interviewed uses the expression, the militarization of love. Multiple deployments take toll on the handlers, and so with the dogs. All mammals, and because all mammals share parts of our brain called the amygdala, where emotions are processed, dogs are thought to even have keener senses than humans, as it's easy to imagine if a soldier comes back with PTSD, so would the dogs. We followed 2 dogs randomly that we met at Lackland and at Fort Hood who returned with PTSD. Paco had an aversion to gunfire and was reconditioned by starting the gunfire at a distance and bringing it closer and closer, rewarding him with the sound of the gunfire with the toy, until the dog was no longer scared to be close to the gunfire, and he was successfully redeployed. Another dog, Enzo, had been close to an artillery round that went off about 100 feet away, and he became very fearful to the point he began to bite and attack handlers. At this point, no one wanted to work with Enzo, and he was left in his kennel for 6 or 8 months without anyone taking him out to play. At this point, Sergeant Carey in the film, who was, as a child, was called Dr. Doolittle because he thought he could understand what a dog was thinking, managed to turn Enzo around, and eventually, however, he wasn't deemed safe for deployment, and he was euthanized. In closing, the dominant species on Earth, it's really up to us to be protectors of animals. To a very large extent, we control the lives of other animals. We're their lifeguards. It's essential that we move rapidly to make kindness and compassion the basis of our interactions with animals. Humans and non-humans have a right to lives of dignity and respect. It's really pretty simple. A plea to regard animals as fellow sentient, emotional beings. As humans, we're responsible for compassion. It is time that humans stop seeing themselves at the top of the evolutionary pyramid in a position of superiority and dominance, but rather we can be seen to have evolved alongside other animals in a collaborative and codependent relationship. If we accept that humans have co-evolved with animals, can we focus even more on the virtues of collaboration, cooperation, and mutual benefit for our society? If we acknowledge that humans and animals depend on one another, can we break through and see that all humans do as well, leading to a more peaceful and just world? Temple Grandin offers a conclusion on the meaning of dog and human relationships. The Aborigines have a saying, dogs make us human. Now we know that's probably true. People wouldn't have become who we are today if we haven't co-evolved with dogs. I think it's true, though, in a different way, that all animals make us human. That's why I hope we'll start to think more respectively about animal intelligence and their unique abilities. That would be good for people, because there are a lot of things we can't do that animals can. We could use their help. The military working dog team exemplifies this human-animal collaboration. That's why I've spoken a lot about animals and how wonderful they are, but really, without the sergeant and his incredible courage to stand out in front of all those troops in a very hostile environment that he was sent to I can't really put one over the other, but to continue to see a coevolution as something that we should honor and respect, and I'm in awe of your service, and thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Nancy. We're drawing to the end of the program. We're going to do something a little different than we've done in the past, and because the 2 speakers we had today were so powerful and so informative, I thought if any of you have questions, we may take a few questions, and they might be able to answer the questions for you. So, does anybody have any questions for any of our guest speakers today? Yep.
I'm just wondering, where was Gulliver by the time that you left him until you adopted him?
He was in Camp Pendleton in San Diego, which was where I was stationed at.
And like, what does he do on the base while he's not deployed?
So he would well, at first, here, I'll come up there. At first, they actually wanted to put him on a junior handler who just graduated from SSD school and send him back to Afghanistan again, which I just couldn't even believe that they would think to to do that. But that's where the mentality, really comes in, that technically they are equipment, and the handler doesn't own that dog. So that's why I said I ultimately lost that battle and had to leave without him. But I guess you could say I lost the battle but won the war, because eventually it stood out, and I called and bothered my unit enough so that they eventually contacted the military working dog program manager at Lackland Air Force Base, who ultimately signed off so that Gulliver could retire and I could get him.
Nice.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, in general, it just seems so appalling to me that you and Gulliver would don't risk your lives the way that you did, and that the government would say, hey, you guys did your time, God bless you both, there you go. I mean, I'm wondering if anybody's fighting toward further changing the laws. I know that it's changed and it's better than it was, but it's still not good enough. You
It is.
shouldn't have to go through that, nor should anyone else who is a handler and is bonded with their dog. And frankly, the dog's done enough time. It's time to
Yes.
retire.
Absolutely. I would definitely say that since our Vietnam era veterans, when I compare it to that, we've come leaps and bounds as far as getting these military working dogs retired and back to one of their previous handlers. Is there room for that to improve more? Yes, absolutely. And I think ultimately with time it will.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
How many dogs are deployed? You're talking about to Afghanistan. How many dogs were deployed?
I could really only speak to the Marine Corps.
Okay.
I couldn't speak for the Army and the other branches, but we at Camp Pendleton were on a rotational basis with Camp Lejeune in North Carolina and Okinawa in Japan, and we deployed up to about 30 dog teams that would spend 7 months there and get relieved by one of those other bases on a rotational basis. So it was pretty much 7 months in country and then 12 months back home.
Wow. And do most handlers, after the deployment, most of these handlers, like yourself, do they adopt their dogs, or most of them do? Or
I would say probably over 90% of the dogs
90%?
today are going to go back to one of their previous handlers. There's rare occasions where that's just not possible due to the nature of the aggressiveness of some of the dogs.
I
Some of
see.
them, they can no
Right.
longer be contained, and there's nothing that we can do.
And the
unfortunately.
10% usually get put down, whatever. They can't
Usually,
be done.
or some of them go on to serve with police departments even.
Okay.
So
That's good.
that's not always, it's not always that worst case scenario.
Oh, okay.
But to answer your question, most of them are going to go back to one of their previous handlers.
When you were reunited with Gulliver, did he remember you? Was that
Yeah, he did. If you go on YouTube, you could watch the video, and you could actually see it. I wore a GoPro on my chest, and some of the Marines that I knew that were still there recorded on their phones, and we kind of made a montage so you could watch it if you wanted to.
What's it called again?
If you go on Google and type in SSD Gulliver retires to New York, it should pop right up. And the thumbnail of it is grass and Gulliver running towards the camera. It should come right up.
There is an organization which SPCA, my name is SPCA, and which releases dogs back to America to work with that organization.
I have not heard of it. No, man.
SPCA.
I'll definitely look into them.
Please do, yeah, they're great.
Yes, sir.
I missed the first couple of minutes of your talk, but can either, and I really appreciate that both of you coming here today. It was wonderful to hear what you had to say. I imagine you had a lot of experience with seeing other examples of how explosive devices may have been removed to make it safe to be there. But I'm unclear why why using dogs would be safer than the electronic or robotic devices. Although you mentioned it briefly in your talk.
I could explain it
Can you
for
talk a little
you.
bit more on this?
So there is no mechanical or electronical device today that is going to be better than the nose of a military working dog, and I don't think there ever will be. And the reason for that primarily is because we're not fighting a stupid enemy by any means. They're highly intelligent, and they come up with IEDs that they make with homemade explosives. They use fertilizer for grass and fuel oil, and they can make an explosive that's,
Wow.
you know, if you compared it to C4, would be thousands of dollars, and they're doing it for probably less than $50 when you think about it. And now when you have components like that that are creating an explosive device with possibly a wooden board as a pressure plate with no metal in it, how do you think a metal detector is going to detect that? But any explosive is going to have explosives in it, and the dog is going to find that. So I hope that answers your question.
Very nice.
When the dog rotates stateside, what role does the dog play?
It depends on how much time his handler has left on his contract. If there's time, that handler and that dog will possibly go back in country again, and that also depends on the current status of the war. Now we're dwindling down, so it's not as prominent as it was 5-10 years ago. Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Would the age of the dog ever preclude his or her coming home with his handler? I'm not talking too old, I'm really talking like too young. Would they say, no, he's too young to come home?
They can definitely do that, and there's not a certain milestone that the dog would hit where now he turned 9 today, he's magically able to be adopted. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. I knew we had a dog, Kitty, at Camp Pendleton, who was probably one of the best specialized search dogs that I've ever seen, and she had, I believe, 5 deployments between Iraq and Afghanistan. And one of my close friends went back with her to Afghanistan when she was 11, and she was still better than half the dogs that were 5, 6, 7 years old. So it's, some dogs are, I guess, beasts, you could say, where they can do it for a long time, and other dogs run into health problems sometimes at young ages where they're not going to be deemed fit for duty anymore, and they can be retired, and they can spend the remainder of their time with their handler or with one of the adoption agencies that looks to adopt retired military working dogs as well. Yes, sir.
What other breeds of dogs are eligible for deployment besides?
There's tons of different breeds, primarily for patrol and explosive detector dogs together, which would be a dual purpose dog that's trained on leash to detect explosives and to do controlled aggression or bite work like many police canines are. Most of the time they're going to be either a German Shepherd or a Belgian Malinois. Specialized search dogs could be either of those 2 breeds, or the military has found even better yet is to use a sporting breed like Gulliver. He's a Vizsla, although he's a little bit darker than most Vizslas. But for SSDs, they really like to use Vizslas, Weimaraner's, German short-haired pointers, dogs that people would use for hunting, like a bird dog. A lot of the drive is already there, and instead of it being a bird, you could make the dog think that it's a game essentially to find the explosive, and he gets a toy and he gets rewarded, so you can transfer that drive into making them work. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering how the military picks out the dogs.
So every branch of service has, I guess you could say, representatives that have been in the military working dog unit for quite some time, and they go overseas to Germany and several other countries, and they go what's on buy trips. And there's vendors in Europe that'll have thousands of different dogs, and they do predisposition tests, I guess you would call it, to test to see if the dog is going to back down from a fight, or if they have drive and they want to fight, for dogs that are going to be utilized for the patrol portion, which would be the controlled aggression, or to see if they have drive to work for a toy so that they could be used for explosives or narcotics detection. And ultimately they select those dogs, the US military purchases them. They come overseas, they go to Lackland Air Force Base, and every branch of service has representatives that go there. And for people that are in the military working dog unit, it's sort of a B-billet essentially, like somebody who's not in that unit would be a drill instructor or a recruiter. Military working dog handlers can go to Lackland to what's called dog training school. And they spend roughly 100 training days with a green dog who knows no commands, who eventually will be certified in patrol and explosive detection or patrol and narcotics detection. And when they graduate, they'll be sent to many of the military bases all around the world that are requiring a need for that specific type of dog. So that's generally how it works.
Over here.
Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. One is, how old does a dog have to be before it gets nominated, so to speak, in service? And does it matter if they're male or female?
No, it doesn't matter if they're male or female. There's not really any difference in how they work, to be honest. And some of the dogs are trained when they're only a few months old with pre-training, and then as they progress, the training can become more advanced so that they can ultimately certify and graduate and go out to the fleet to one of the military working dog units that's going to have a need for that dog. You're welcome. All right.
Very good. Very good. Very good.
Okay, once again, thank you. I have a few announcements to make, and then we will do the wreath laying at the War Dog Memorial. First and foremost, I want to recognize the Hartsdale staff, Trevor, Renee, Erasmo, Yetzi, for making the cemetery always look so nice, and especially this week for the War Dog Memorial. So thank you for all your hard work. I also want to thank the plot holders who purchase flowers, have their monuments cleaned, order all the special days. It helps make the cemetery look better. We keep the prices down for that so that everybody can have flowers, and the more people have flowers, the better the cemetery looks overall. So if you purchase flowers and you have your monuments cleaned, thank you for that. And along those lines, if anybody wants to have marigolds placed on their plot, we still have them available. You can order them at the office. Have them placed on your plot today if you'd like. For those who donated to the Heritage Fund, we thank you for that also. It's very important for restoring some of the older monuments here and preserving them, like the War Dog Memorial and some of the other more historic stones here. So thank you for your help there. The next event we're having is the Pet Memorial Day Blessing of the Animals on Sunday, September 10th. You can stay in touch with us on our e-alerts and on social media. We're on Facebook, on Instagram. In fact, I believe the YouTube that Matthew is referring to is on our social media. So if you're unable to find it on your own, I think he gave you pretty good directions. But if you're unable to find it, just go to our Facebook page and some of our social media pages. I think that we also sent it out as an email blast. So if you want to be notified of things like that, and also Nancy's trailer for her movie is also on there. So when we promote these events, we do put things on like that. So if you do want to be notified, you just go onto our website and you can go and sign up for the e-alerts. And the last thing before we close, you may have noticed we're having a pet adoption over there. So we're happy to have the Shelter Pet Alliance return this year. There were a couple of years where, the past few years, they've had other events, and so they were not able to be here, and we're really glad that they are here today. Allison Roser and Jill Potter head up the Shelter Pet Alliance, and they're super nice people. Definitely introduce yourself to them. The participating shelters and rescue groups we have this year are Wayward Ranch Animal Sanctuary in White Plains. They have dogs, cats, rabbits, and they even have potbelly pigs if you're interested in that. Fur 911 is a foster home based group who do feline only rescue, and pet rescue is here also. There may be a few others I've missed, but if you have space in your home and in your heart, then please consider adopting. As they say, adopt, don't shop. So that concludes the program today. The pet adoption will be running until 3 o'clock today. That concludes the program here. I'll give everybody 5 minutes or so to work their way up to the War Dog Memorial, and we're going to have a wreath laying there. So we'll see you in there in a few minutes.